The methane storm howled outside the reinforced dome, its toxic winds screaming against transparent alloys that had been pushed far beyond their original design specifications. Jack Harper watched the swirling orange-green maelstrom through a viewport that bore the scars of countless environmental assaults. Each scratch, each micro-crater told a story of survival, the primary language spoken on Epsilon 9. His right hand, a marvel of biomechanical engineering, traced the viewport's surface. 3 fingers were original flesh, 2 were custom-grown replacements, and the entire limb integrated seamlessly with neural interfaces that most galactic medical centers would have considered impossible. On Epsilon 9, impossibility was just another resource to be repurposed. Incoming resource harvest team, a synthetic voice announced through the chamber speakers. The voice belonged to Core, the colony's central operational response engine, a distributed intelligence that was part computer system, part survival mechanism, and entirely a product of human desperation. Jack turned, surveying the preparation area. 12 workers moved with practiced efficiency, each one a walking testament to human adaptability. Maria Gonzalez, once a corporate environmental engineer convicted of industrial sabotage, now led the colony's atmospheric reclamation unit. Her environmental suit was a patchwork of custom modifications, sensor arrays jutting from unexpected angles, each piece salvaged and repurposed from what would be considered waste in any other human settlement. To her left, Hassan Ahmed adjusted a molecular filtration system. His hands moved with the precision of a surgeon, despite having spent 8 years in a maximum security prison for algorithmic terrorism. Here, his skills meant survival, not just for himself, but for the entire colony. Epsilon 9 was never meant to be a home. It was a punishment, a final destination for those whom the galactic judicial systems had deemed irredeemable. Criminals, political dissidents, technological radicals, all dumped on a planet so hostile that initial colonization reports had declared it virtually uninhabitable. But humans, especially those with nothing left to lose, had a remarkable way of redefining the impossible. The resource harvest team prepared to exit the primary dome. Each suit was a masterpiece of improvised engineering. Standard-issue environmental protection had been completely dismantled and rebuilt, incorporating biological adaptation technologies, quantum state materials, and survival modifications that would make mainstream researchers weep with a combination of horror and fascination. Pressure equalization in 3 minutes, Core announced. The synthetic voice carried an undertone that almost resembled anticipation. Jack approached the team, his cybernetic eye scanning each member's suit, running diagnostic checks faster than any standard system. The eye was a custom piece, developed in the colony's underground research facilities, part medical technology, part survival tool, entirely unauthorized by any galactic regulatory body. "Remember the new filtration protocol," he said, his voice calm despite the raging storm outside. "The methane concentration has increased by 0.03% since our last harvest. Adjust your molecular scrubbers accordingly." Maria nodded, her helmet's display flickering with real-time environmental data. "We've been tracking the atmospheric shift. The recent geological activity near the southern ridge is accelerating mineral decomposition faster than our previous models predicted." It was more than just a scientific observation. On Epsilon 9, every environmental change was a potential threat and an opportunity. The airlock began its complex sequence of decontamination and pressure stabilization. Specialized membranes filtered out toxic particles, radiation screens activated, and micro-repair systems stood ready to seal any potential breaches in the team's protective gear. Jack watched as the team prepared to step into a world that had killed numerous previous colonization attempts. This was not exploration. This was warfare. A constant battle against an environment that wanted nothing more than to eradicate any form of life. "Core," he sub-vocalized, activating his neural link. "Run probability scenarios for today's harvest." A cascade of holographic data erupted from his cybernetic eye, displaying potential outcomes, risk factors, and survival probabilities. Numbers danced, shifted, recalculated, a living mathematics of human survival. Outside, the methane storm continued its relentless assault. Inside the dome, humanity's most unlikely survivors prepared to push back. The survey ship Nexus Pathfinder hung in space like a crystalline predator, its sleek design a testament to Vexnera engineering precision. Commander Zara Clarix studied the holographic display with a mixture of clinical detachment and bureaucratic boredom. Another routine planetary assessment, another unremarkable human colony to be cataloged and forgotten. Her secondary neural cluster processed incoming sensor data, filtering through layers of electromagnetic signatures, atmospheric compositions, and technological emissions. The computer systems of the Vexnera were renowned across known space, adaptive, intelligent, capable of processing quintillions of data points in microseconds. Yet something felt unusual about this particular scan. Specialist Vornak, she called, her translucent skin shifting to a pale blue, the Vexnera equivalent of mild curiosity. Replay the spectral analysis of Grid Sector 7 Delta. The junior specialist adjusted the holographic interface, his manipulative tendrils moving with practiced efficiency. The image resolved, showing a planet that should have been nothing more than a toxic wasteland. Initial reports classified Epsilon 9 as a penal colony, a dumping ground for human refuse, barely capable of supporting microbial life. But the sensor readings told a different story. Microfluctuations in the planetary electromagnetic field suggested technological activity far beyond what should have been possible. Quantum entanglement signatures flickered at the edge of detection, like whispers just beyond hearing. Atmospheric processing showed signs of deliberate manipulation that defied standard colonization protocols. Impossible, Vornak muttered, his language translator converting the complex clicks and resonances of Vexnera speech into standard galactic communication. Commander Clarix's secondary eyes, crystalline organs that could perceive spectrums far beyond human or most known biological capabilities, narrowed. "Define impossible," she responded, a hint of challenge in her tone. The junior specialist recalibrated the sensors, running multiple verification protocols. Each pass revealed more inconsistencies. The planet's surface showed signs of systematic modification. Toxic atmospheric zones were being gradually transformed. Mineral extraction patterns suggested not just survival, but deliberate terraforming. The human colony, Vornak began, appears to be conducting environmental reconstruction at a rate that exceeds all known technological capabilities. Clarix knew the standard narrative about humans. They were a young species, technologically primitive, driven more by emotional impulse than scientific precision. The galactic records classified them as potential but underdeveloped, a species with promise, but far from true technological mastery. This data suggested something entirely different. "Prepare a secondary scan," she commanded. "Full spectrum analysis. I want every quantum signature, every molecular movement documented." The Nexus Pathfinder adjusted its position, advanced sensor arrays extending like crystalline tendrils. Specialized scanning beams penetrated the planet's atmosphere, each pulse carrying enough computational power to map entire ecosystems in milliseconds. What they discovered was nothing short of revolutionary. The human colony wasn't just surviving. They were transforming an entire planetary ecosystem through technologies that challenged fundamental understanding of environmental engineering. Nanoscale machines worked in complex, adaptive networks. Atmospheric processors didn't just filter, they actively rebuilt molecular structures. This was not the work of desperate prisoners. This was systematic, intentional planetary reconstruction. Encryption detected, Vornak reported, his translator rendering increasing excitement. Multiple layered communication protocols. They're broadcasting, but in a way that's designed to appear like background radiation. Clarix leaned forward, her neural clusters now fully engaged. Humans had a reputation for unexpected innovation, But this went beyond mere technological surprise. This was a fundamental reimagining of survival itself. The colony's defensive systems were equally fascinating. Quantum camouflage technologies that could bend electromagnetic signatures, adaptive communication networks that could reconfigure faster than any tracking system could lock onto them. It was as if the entire settlement was a living, breathing organism, constantly changing, constantly adapting. "We need to reassess our classification," Cleric said quietly. The words carried more weight than a simple observation. In Vexenera culture, such a statement was close to a revolutionary declaration. Vornak's response came with a resonance that suggested both excitement and caution. The humans of Epsilon 9 are not what the records suggest. They are something else entirely. Outside the ship's observation deck, the planet continued its silent transformation, unaware, or perhaps completely aware, that it was being watched, waiting, preparing. The underground research facility sprawled beneath Epsilon 9's primary dome like a living nervous system. Cables pulsed with quantum-encoded energy, holographic interfaces flickered with impossible complexity, and at the center of it all stood Emma Rodriguez, her hands moving through fields of light and data. She was constructing something beyond mere technology. This was a revolution encoded in molecules and mathematical potential. The nano-adaptive terraforming system, her life's work and the colony's greatest secret, represented humanity's most audacious technological leap. Each component was a story of survival, of human ingenuity forged in the crucible of desperation. Maria Gonzalez watched from a secondary workstation, her environmental engineering background providing critical insights. "The molecular restructuring algorithm is showing unexpected stability," she called out, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that would have made mainstream researchers weep with a combination of envy and disbelief. Emma nodded, her cybernetic eye tracking microscopic changes that normal human vision could never perceive. 3 years of work had culminated in this moment, a technology that could fundamentally reshape planetary ecosystems at the molecular level. "Initial test sequence," she subvocalized, activating the primary neural interface. The room seemed to hold its breath. Microscopic nanites began their complex dance, each one a marvel of engineering that defied conventional understanding. They moved through simulated environmental models, breaking down toxic molecular structures, rebuilding atmospheric compositions, generating entirely new ecological pathways. What made this system unique wasn't just its adaptive capabilities. It was the fundamental philosophy behind its design. These weren't simple environmental tools. They were living technologies, part machine, part biological system, entirely a product of human survival instinct. Hassan Ahmed approached, carrying a complex sensor array. Once imprisoned for algorithmic terrorism, he was now the colony's most brilliant computational engineer. "The quantum entanglement protocols are holding," he reported. "We're maintaining structural integrity across multiple dimensional interfaces." Emma knew the true significance of what they were creating. This wasn't just a way to survive Epsilon 9. This was a technology that could transform entire planetary ecosystems. Worlds considered uninhabitable could be reshaped, rebuilt, made livable through calculated, precise intervention. Jack Harper entered the facility, his cybernetic systems running continuous diagnostic scans. "External monitoring shows no detection," he said. The words carried the weight of their constant vigilance. Discovery could mean destruction. The nanite swarm continued its work, breaking down complex molecular bonds, restructuring atmospheric compositions with surgical precision. In the simulation chamber, toxic environments transformed into nascent ecosystems in accelerated time. Mineral-dense rock became potential soil. Poisonous atmospheric gases were converted into breathable compounds. "Breakthrough imminent," Maria announced, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and cautious hope. The technology represented more than a scientific achievement. It was a middle finger to a galactic system that had deemed these humans worthless. Criminals. Exiles. The refuse of human civilization. Now they were creating something that could fundamentally reshape planetary development. Emma's hand hovered over the final activation sequence. Years of work, countless failures, moments of despair, all converging in this single moment of potential transformation. Initiating full-spectrum molecular restructuring, she announced. The nanite swarm exploded into complex patterns, their movement too intricate for standard tracking systems. They moved like a living organism, adapting, changing, rebuilding at a molecular level that defied traditional understanding of environmental engineering. Hassan watched the computational models with a scientist's precision. "Computational projections are off the charts," he muttered. "We're looking at a potential ecosystem generation rate 400% faster than any known terraforming technology." Jack approached the main display, his cybernetic eye running parallel analysis. "This changes everything," he said quietly. And he was right. In that moment, the outcasts of human society were creating a technology that would rewrite the fundamental understanding of planetary development. What had begun as a desperate attempt to survive would become a weapon of unprecedented potential. The nanites continued their work, transforming the impossible into the inevitable. Molecule by molecule, they were reshaping the future. The first planetary consumption happened without warning. The research outpost on Kepler 286, a vibrant scientific hub of the Galactic Confederation, simply vanished. Not destroyed, not obliterated, consumed. Galactic communication networks erupted in panic. Sensor arrays across multiple star systems recorded the event, a massive energy signature that defied conventional understanding, where an entire planetary system had existed moments before. Now there was nothing. No debris, no radiation signature, simply absence. The void devourers had arrived. Admiral Helena Reyes studied the holographic display aboard the Confederation's primary command station. Her weathered hands, marked by decades of deep space exploration, trembled almost imperceptibly. Entire civilizations were being erased, and no one understood how. "Computational analysis," she demanded, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the command center. Dr. Samuel Chen, the Confederation's lead xenophysicist, approached with a holographic report that flickered with dire implications. "The entity, if we can call it that, doesn't interact with matter as we understand it. It's not destroying planets. It's consuming them at a quantum structural level." 12 planetary systems had already disappeared, millions of sentient beings erased from existence in less time than it took to draw a breath. The void devourers moved like a cosmic plague, consuming entire star systems with a methodical precision that suggested something beyond mere destruction. They were systematic, calculated, utterly alien in a way that challenged fundamental understanding of existence. "We're detecting no standard energy signatures," Chen continued. "No weapon signatures, no propulsion systems. They simply appear, consume, vanish." Reyes understood what remained unspoken. Traditional defensive technologies were useless. Shields, weapons, defensive networks, all became irrelevant against an entity that consumed matter at its most fundamental level. Across the galaxy, species began to panic. The Vexnera military mobilized entire fleet sectors. The crystalline warrior cultures of the Zorn Confederacy prepared for what seemed like an inevitable apocalypse. Communication networks buzzed with increasingly desperate messages. But something else was happening, something that would change everything. On isolated research stations, in forgotten colonies, in the margins of explored space, humans were watching, analyzing, preparing. The void devourers represented a challenge that conventional thinking could not solve. They were a problem that required a fundamentally different approach to understanding existence itself. "Quantum consumption rate is accelerating," Chen reported, his voice barely maintaining professional composure. "They're moving beyond our computational models. Each consumed system provides them additional capability." It was more than an invasion. It was a systematic erasure of existence. Admiral Reyes pulled up historical records. Previous encounters with unknown entities had always followed predictable patterns: communication, conflict, resolution. But the Void Devourers existed outside those parameters. They were consuming reality itself. Emergency protocols cascaded through galactic communication networks. Evacuation plans were drafted. Defensive strategies were proposed and immediately discarded. Entire species were preparing for potential extinction. The Confederation's most advanced AI systems worked continuously, searching for any potential defensive strategy. Quantum computers processed scenarios at speeds that would have driven biological minds to madness, and found nothing. "We're running out of options," Chen said quietly. Reyes knew what that meant. When conventional strategies failed, the truly desperate would start looking to the margins, to the outcasts, to those who had been forgotten. In the depths of space, something was watching, waiting, preparing. The Void Devourers continued their systematic consumption, unaware that humanity's most unlikely survivors were about to change everything. Epsilon 9 was preparing its response. The galaxy would never be the same. The communication came encoded in layers of quantum encryption so complex that most standard receivers would have dismissed it as random noise. But on Epsilon 9, nothing was ever truly random. Jack Harper's cybernetic eye flickered, processing the incoming transmission faster than any biological system could comprehend. His fingers moved across holographic interfaces, peeling back layers of data that would have driven a standard computer into catastrophic overload. "We're being contacted," he announced to the central command room, his voice carrying a mixture of anticipation and caution. Emma Rodriguez approached, her own neural interfaces humming with computational energy. The message was from the Vexnera, a species that had once catalogued humans as a marginally interesting but ultimately inconsequential civilization. Now they were begging for help. The transmission contained more than words. It was a complete data package: sensor readings, planetary consumption patterns, computational models of the Void Devourers that revealed a threat far beyond anything previously understood. "They're desperate," Maria Gonzalez observed, her environmental analysis systems running parallel decryption protocols. The computational models suggest total galactic extinction within 3 standard solar cycles if the current consumption rate continues. Hassan Ahmed moved between holographic displays, his fingers dancing across quantum-encrypted interfaces. "The transmission itself is a work of art," he muttered. "They've embedded survival data in ways that suggest complete technological surrender." Jack understood the subtext. The Vexnera were offering everything: complete access to their technological archives, full military support, unrestricted computational resources, all in exchange for a potential solution to the cosmic threat that was consuming entire star systems. Emma's hand hovered over the primary response interface. This was more than a diplomatic moment. This was a potential turning point for human civilization. "They want our nano-adaptive terraforming technology," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. The room fell silent. Every person in the command center understood what that meant. The technology they had developed to survive Epsilon 9 was far more than a planetary reconstruction tool. It was a fundamental reimagining of how matter and energy could interact. Jack's cybernetic eye ran multiple scenario projections. Each one painted a different picture of potential galactic salvation or total destruction. "We've been preparing for this," Maria said, her voice steady. "Every modification, every survival protocol. This is what we've been working towards." The nano-adaptive system represented something beyond traditional technological understanding. It wasn't just about reshaping planets. It was about understanding and manipulating fundamental structural interactions at a quantum level. Hassan brought up a comprehensive display of their latest technological developments: molecular restructuring protocols that could potentially interact with the Void Devourers in ways no other civilization had conceived, communication systems that could potentially decode entities that existed outside standard dimensional understanding. "They're not just consuming," Emma observed, studying the Vexnera's computational models. They're evolving, adapting. Each consumed system provides them with additional computational capacity. The implications were staggering. Jack's neural interface began running comprehensive threat analysis. The Void Devourers weren't a traditional enemy. They were a systemic threat that consumed and integrated information at a level that challenged fundamental understanding of existence. "We'll need complete access to their sensor networks," Jack said finally. "Full computational integration." The request was more than a technological requirement. It was a complete surrender of galactic technological sovereignty. Emma looked at her team. These were the same people who had been cast out. Criminals, rebels, technological radicals. Now they stood as potentially the only hope for galactic survival. "Prepare the response transmission," she commanded. The message they would send would change everything. Humanity's most unlikely survivors were about to become galactic saviors. The first deployment of human technology sent shockwaves through galactic communication networks. What began as a desperate transmission from the Vexnera became a complete restructuring of fundamental understanding. Emma Rodriguez stood at the center of a holographic command center, her neural interfaces connected to the most advanced computational systems ever assembled. Quantum communication arrays stretched across multiple star systems, creating a network that defied traditional understanding of information transfer. Each node was a marvel of human engineering. Technologies developed in the desperate margins of human existence, now becoming the potential salvation of entire civilizations. Initial interface established, Hassan Ahmed reported, his voice barely containing the excitement of scientific breakthrough. The Void Devourers had consumed computational models as a method of adaptation. They integrated information, transformed it, used it as a weapon of systematic consumption. Humanity's response would be something entirely different. Instead of resistance, they would offer communication. Emma's nano-adaptive systems began their complex dance. Microscopic networks of quantum-entangled particles moved through computational space, creating pathways of understanding that no previous civilization had conceived. They weren't fighting the Void Devourers. They were attempting to communicate with them at a fundamental level of existence. Jack Harper monitored the global systems, his cybernetic eye tracking millions of simultaneous computational processes. "We're establishing a dimensional communication protocol," he announced. "Something beyond standard electromagnetic interactions." Maria Gonzalez worked on environmental adaptation models. The same technologies they had developed to survive Epsilon 9's hostile environment were now being applied to understanding an entity that consumed entire star systems. Each molecular modification was a potential key to understanding. The galactic observation networks watched in stunned silence. What humanity was attempting was beyond any previous concept of first contact. They weren't trying to destroy the Void Devourers. They were trying to understand them, to communicate with an entity that existed outside standard dimensional understanding. Quantum entanglement arrays created bridges of information. Molecular communication protocols suggested potential methods of interaction that challenged everything known about information transfer. The nano-adaptive systems moved like living intelligence, creating pathways of potential understanding. "Computational models are showing unexpected responses," Hassan reported, his fingers moving across holographic interfaces that seemed to pulse with living energy. The Void Devourers began to change. Where they had previously consumed systematically, now they began to slow. The computational models suggested something unprecedented, the beginnings of communication. Not conflict, not destruction. Communication. Emma understood the true significance of what they were achieving. This wasn't just about survival. This was about fundamentally reimagining the nature of interaction between different forms of existence. Vexnera observation stations reported increasingly bizarre sensor readings. The Void Devourers weren't being defeated. They were being understood. "We're establishing a form of dimensional dialogue," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of scientific revolution. Jack's computational analysis showed something remarkable. The nano-adaptive systems were creating a form of translation, not just of language, but of fundamental existence. They were finding common ground with an entity that existed beyond traditional understanding of matter and energy. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A consumed star system suddenly stabilized, not restored to its previous state, but transformed. The void devourers had stopped consuming. They were listening. Humanity's most unlikely survivors had done what no other civilization had conceived. They were communicating with an entity that consumed entire star systems, not through weapons, not through traditional diplomacy, through understanding. Maria looked at the computational models with scientific wonder. "We're establishing a form of mutual comprehension," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and profound scientific humility. The galaxy watched as humanity, the species once considered marginal, the civilization dumped on the most hostile of planetary environments, began to rewrite the fundamental understanding of existence itself. The outcasts were becoming something else entirely. Saviors, translators, a bridge between incomprehensible forms of existence. The counteroffensive began not with weapons, but with understanding. Jack Harper led the first wave of adapted human warriors, each one a living testament to human survival and innovation. Their combat suits were more than protective gear. They were adaptive biological mechanical systems that redefined the very concept of warfare. Quantum communication arrays extended from their neural interfaces, creating a living network that moved like a single, coherent organism. These were not traditional soldiers. They were translators, interpreters, living bridges between incomprehensible forms of existence. Approaching primary consumption zone, Maria Gonzalez reported, her environmental analysis systems running continuous threat assessments. The star system they entered had been completely consumed by the void devourers. Where planets and stellar bodies once existed, now there was only a complex quantum landscape that defied traditional understanding of space and matter. Emma Rodriguez monitored the mission from the central command station, her neural interfaces connected to every member of the team. The nano-adaptive technologies they had developed on Epsilon 9 were about to face their ultimate test. Initiating dimensional communication protocol, Hassan Ond announced, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that pulsed with living energy. Traditional military doctrine suggested confrontation, destruction, overwhelming force. Humanity's approach was fundamentally different. The adapted warriors moved through the consumed space, their biological mechanical systems creating intricate communication networks. They weren't fighting. They were listening, understanding, translating the fundamental language of an entity that consumed entire star systems. Jack's cybernetic eye tracked millions of simultaneous computational processes. Each movement was a complex negotiation, a delicate dance of understanding that challenged everything known about conflict and communication. Detecting responsive quantum signatures, one of the team members reported. The void devourers began to change. Where they had previously consumed systematically, now they began to interact. Not with weapons, not with traditional forms of communication, but with a complex exchange of fundamental information that suggested something beyond conflict. Maria's environmental systems began to reconstruct the consumed space, not through traditional terraforming, but through a complex quantum dialogue that suggested the possibility of mutual understanding. "We're establishing a form of dimensional negotiation," Emma observed, her voice carrying the weight of unprecedented scientific breakthrough. The consumed star system began to stabilize, not return to its previous state, but transform into something entirely new. A hybrid space that existed between consumption and creation. Hassan's computational models showed something unprecedented. The void devourers weren't being defeated. They were being understood, integrated, transformed. Jack's team moved like living communication arrays, each member a complex biological mechanical system that could translate, negotiate, and potentially transform an entity that consumed entire star systems. Dimensional stability increasing, a team member reported. The Galactic observation networks watched in stunned silence. Humanity's approach was nothing short of revolutionary. They weren't fighting an enemy. They were establishing communication with a fundamental form of cosmic existence that no other civilization had conceived possible. Maria's environmental reconstruction systems began to show remarkable results. The consumed space wasn't being restored, it was being transformed, created, reimagined. "We're establishing a form of mutual comprehension," Emma said quietly, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and profound humility. The first consumed star system began to stabilize. Quantum structures that had been systematically consumed now began to interact in complex, unprecedented ways. Not destruction, not restoration, transformation. Jack's team continued their delicate dance of communication. Each moment a complex negotiation that suggested the possibility of understanding between fundamentally different forms of existence. The galaxy watched as humanity, the species once considered marginal, the civilization dumped on the most hostile of planetary environments, began to rewrite the fundamental understanding of conflict, communication, and cosmic interaction. The Outcasts were becoming something else entirely. Translators, mediators, a bridge between incomprehensible forms of existence. The counteroffensive continued, not with weapons, but with understanding. The Galactic Confederation Hall stood as a testament to transformed possibility. Where once rigid bureaucratic structures had dominated, now a new understanding emerged, led by the survivors of Epsilon 9. Jack Harper stood at the central podium, his cybernetic eye scanning the assembled representatives from hundreds of galactic civilizations. His right hand, part flesh, part advanced biomechanical engineering, rested lightly on the quantum communication interface. "We are not conquerors," he began, his voice carrying the weight of their extraordinary journey. "We are translators." Emma Rodriguez sat to his left, her neural interfaces subtly monitoring the complex communication networks that now spanned multiple dimensional spaces. The technologies they had developed to survive on a hostile planet had become the foundation of a new galactic understanding. The transformation had been complete and unprecedented. The Void Devourers were no longer a threat. They had become partners, collaborators in a complex dimensional exchange that redefined the very concept of existence. What had begun as a potential apocalypse had become a revolutionary form of cosmic communication. Maria Gonzalez presented the environmental reconstruction reports. Entire star systems that had been consumed were now thriving in ways that challenged previous understanding of planetary development. Not restored to their original state, but transformed into complex, adaptive ecosystems that bridged multiple forms of existence. Hassan Ahmed's computational models showed the true extent of their achievement. The nano-adaptive technologies developed in the desperate margins of human survival had become the foundation of a new form of galactic interaction. "We did not defeat the Void Devourers," Emma explained to the assembled representatives. "We communicated with them. We found a common ground of understanding that transcended traditional concepts of conflict and resolution." The representatives from various galactic civilizations listened in stunned silence. The Vexinara, who had once catalogued humans as a marginally interesting species, now sat as honored partners. Their most advanced computational systems had been humbled, transformed by humanity's unique approach to understanding. Jack's presentation revealed the full scope of their journey. How a colony of outcasts, criminals, exiles, technological radicals, had become the key to preventing galactic extinction. Their survival technologies, developed in the most hostile environment imaginable, had become the foundation of a new form of cosmic interaction. "Survival is not about strength," Jack said quietly. "It's about adaptation, understanding, communication." The transformation extended beyond technological achievement. The survivors of Epsilon 9 had fundamentally reshaped human civilization's position in the galaxy. No longer seen as a marginal species, they were now the primary translators of complex dimensional interactions. Maria's environmental reconstruction projects were already transforming multiple star systems. Consumed spaces became living networks of incredible complexity, not restored, not rebuilt, transformed. Asen presented computational models that suggested this was only the beginning. The communication protocols developed with the Void Devourers opened possibilities that challenged everything known about existence, information transfer, and cosmic interaction. Emma looked out over the assembled representatives. These were the same civilizations that had once dismissed humans as irrelevant. Now they hung on every word, every computational model, every suggestion. "We are not overlords," she said, echoing Jack's earlier statement. "We are bridges." The survivors of Epsilon 9 had done more than save the galaxy. They had fundamentally reimagined the concept of survival, communication, and existence itself. Jack's final presentation revealed the true depth of their achievement. The technologies developed to survive a hostile planet had become the foundation of a new form of galactic understanding. Dimensional communication, ecological transformation, the complete reimagining of conflict resolution. The Outcasts had become something else entirely. Translators, mediators, bridges between incomprehensible forms of existence. As the presentation concluded, the assembled representatives understood a fundamental truth. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, to understand, to transform. The story of Epsilon 9 was more than a tale of survival. It was a revolution.